So the other day, Mojang revealed that copper tools, armor, chests, and the old copper golem are gonna be part of the next Minecraft update. The copper golem is definitely a much welcomed addition. The race in 2021 was tight between the Allay and copper golem, and with the Allay just barely edging out the copper golem, it's nice to finally see another loser make its way off the backlog and into the game. The copper golem has huge potential too for item sorters and such, much like the Allay did. I just hope that it doesn't go down the same path as the Allay, that being that it has massive potential and then gets completely ignored once it's added. This video isn't about the copper golem though, because that does work. This video is about what doesn't work, and in this update's case, it's the copper tools and armor. As of right now, copper tools are slated to be a tier between stone and iron, but they're not really. They're more of a side grade to stone, as they aren't any stronger than stone in terms of mineable blocks. They're just kind of slightly faster and stronger, but less so than iron. This is kind of where the problem lies though, because in reality, there's no space between stone and iron in which it'll still be useful or even viable to make copper tools and armor. To really understand this, we need to discuss a bit about Minecraft's tech tree. Minecraft's tech tree has remained largely the same since 2010, with the only addition to it being netherite tacked onto the end in 2020. The progression from wood to stone to iron to diamond worked, and still does work very well. It flows nicely from one stage to the other, and it does its job just fine, which already warrants the question as to why it was necessary to shoehorn copper into there. And I say shoehorn with confidence, because copper tools currently are not a very well implemented feature at all, but we'll touch on that later. The way Minecraft's progression is structured is very simple, but more importantly, it was not designed to be expanded upon at any point other than the end, because again, there's literally no space for a new tool set to fit in. This is evident in the damage that each tier sword does. Each tier simply adds one more damage to the sword and most other tools aside from the axe. The copper sword, however, still does 5 damage like a stone sword, and so the copper sword is quite literally useless. Oh, but it has more durability. Yeah, it does, but like, we're talking about stone here, the most abundant block in the entire Minecraft world. It is not a problem to get new stone tools, and it is 100% less of a hassle to get than copper would be for the upgraded offers. Speaking of abundant and not really hard to get, iron would like to speak up and also dog on copper tools. The other and probably larger main reason as to why copper tools just don't work is because of where it's being inserted, between the two easiest tiers of tools to get in the game. And yes, I'm gonna say that stone is actually easier to get than wood, because stone is everywhere in the world and trees aren't. The existence of copper tools, and more importantly their usefulness, is completely dependent on how easy it is to obtain iron. Hot take, copper tools would have a better place in old Minecraft than modern Minecraft. There are so many ways to get iron in this game that it's practically spoon-fed to you like a little baby off spawn. Copper tools essentially spread the lie that iron is somehow hard to find, which is obviously just not true. Oh, but new players who don't go down in the caves. Yeah, it's still possible for them to get iron with ease, because surface iron is so common that in some cases, by design of the ore distribution from 1.18, it's literally impossible to find copper where iron is still present. Back in old Minecraft though, there weren't as many ways to get iron, and iron ore almost always generated underground, with the occasional surface iron as a little bonus. If copper existed back then, copper tools, while still being kinda useless since iron still wasn't that hard to find, would be a more warranted addition. Seriously, the abundance of iron is a huge problem for copper tools. Villages give you iron, desert temples give you iron, jungle temples give you iron, room portals give you iron nuggets to craft into iron, shipwrecks give you iron, and a map that when you follow it leads to more iron. All of these things can be found on the surface or in the ocean without having to take a single plunge into a cave. Copper, on the other hand, doesn't spawn anywhere except underground and in surface stone patches. If you can get iron from all these different places and copper from none of them, then it's quite possible and also quite likely to have full iron before you even explore a cave. And at that point, what is the purpose of copper tools and armor? None. Literally zero. This is why copper tools don't work. They're quite literally pointless. Another tier that faces the same problem actually is leather. There is no point to craft leather armor unless you spawned into a field of cows and got very lucky with leather drops. And even then, there's so much better things that you could spend leather on, like item frames or books. This has been a problem with leather for years, where it just doesn't stand a chance because iron exists and how easy it is to get. In fact, I'd actually say it's easier to get iron armor than leather armor because much like my wood versus stone idea, there's iron everywhere in the world, but leather only where cows are. The last thing we want though is another leather, and just in general, 9 more useless bloat items. And if copper tools stay the way they are, that's what they're gonna be, another leather. That's why I propose a fix that would make copper tools actually useful and not just an ignored forgettable feature. If copper tools, or any new tool set for that matter, are inserted into the current progression, they need to have a distinct and unique feature about them that gives them a reason to exist. In the case of copper tools, I propose a new idea that we've never seen before: oxidation states. In Minecraft, there are currently 4 oxidation states for copper: regular, exposed, weathered, and oxidized. Copper will slowly transition from regular to oxidized over time, and so why not add that to the tools to give them a unique twist? The oxidation level of the tool will be determined by its durability, not its age, and so we can just cut the durability bar into quarters and assign an oxidation state to each one. The oxidation state will only affect the tool's speed, and so a fresh copper tool will start at a speed in between iron and diamond. Once it hits 75% durability though, it will be an exposed copper tool, lowering its speed to the speed of iron. At 50%, it'll lower to its current speed between stone and iron, and for the last 25%, it'll lower to just stone speed. It'll keep the same durability of 191, giving it 48 mines at each stage. We'll also make the copper sword deal 5.5 damage instead, just to give it a reason to exist since it won't be affected by these oxidation changes. I think that this is actually a pretty good idea to give copper tools some ground to stand on. On a fresh craft, they'll be better than iron, but the catch is that they don't stay like that, incentivizing you to still move up to iron, which will give you a slightly slower mining speed, but won't have the fluctuation that copper does, and will yield more durability. Let's also give armor an upgrade as well. Currently, a full set of copper armor gives 5 armor bars of defense. Instead of that though, let's bring in the oxidation mechanic from the tools and bring back an old mechanic that was removed 14 years ago, the beta armor system. If you didn't know, before Minecraft 1.0, the amount of defense an armor piece would give to you was based on its durability rather than being a set value for each tier. A full set of armor would give you full defense no matter what tier it was, but would weaken quicker or slower depending on the tier. This armor system would obviously be terrible to have for every set, but I think that bringing this back for copper armor would be cool. Of course, it would need to be tweaked a bit to fit into the modern game, but the bottom line is that a fresh set of copper armor would give you full defense, 10 armor bars. At 75% durability, the full set would only give 7.5 armor bars, and so on. You get the point. This seems really powerful, and to a degree, it actually is. Copper armor could have utility beyond even iron with this mechanic, as combining it with unbreaking and mending could make for a pretty decent pre-diamond armor set. The oxidation mechanic on copper tools and armor could single-handedly save this tool and armor set from being banished to the realm of useless and forgotten items, and even give it some utility past where its intended use is. Unfortunately though, I've kinda come to accept that what we're seeing now is most likely how copper tools and armor are gonna end up in the game. A useless tier between stone and iron that's barely used and completely overshadowed by the overly abundant tier above. Nah, who am I kidding? I'm obviously just nostalgia blind for iron.